Hello, Raza community. Welcome to Office Hours. This week we have Ty joining us again. Sorry, I was just looking at your name. It was like, again. Yeah, that's how you spell again. Welcome back. Happy to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let me make sure this is muted. Otherwise, that'll be a bad time for everybody when the stream catches up to us. Yeah, so we don't have any questions in the chat quite yet, so we're waiting for them to come in. Something I've been thinking about a lot and talking with people about that I think you would have particular insight into is how do you know when a project should be a chatbot? Like, I think we can all agree, not everything should be a chatbot. Not everything should be a conversational AI. But what should be? What are some of the hallmarks of a project where you're like, yeah, this is a good use case?
Really good question. Philosophical too. Oh, no, I can. Maybe it's easier to first start with where shouldn't you use a chatbot? Like I was just explaining to some new members of the Raza team in our product onboarding that. I mean, something where like there's a lot of information to see on a screen is probably not a great use case for chatbots, right? So like, I wouldn't want to like be updating a spreadsheet via chatbot or whatever, right? Maybe there's aspects of a spreadsheet. It'd be real nice to be like, hey, create this nice graph for me about profits for this product for this year, right? Like that seems a lot more effective. But you know, I'm probably going to continue to use my laptop to code and my laptop to do Zoom calls, and I'm going to probably continue, I mean, on my phone to, look at Twitter and stuff like that. I can imagine it being read out to me and verbally communicating back. It seems like when there's lots of information, maybe that you need to process, and it makes sense to see it all together. Probably not a great use for chatbot. Areas where it does make sense is like when, especially like voice interfaces, when you're when maybe your hands are occupied, or like driving a car, for example, right? Like you can't, be typing on something, or when your eyes are occupied, once again, driving a car, right? Or even like cooking food, right? For example, I think those are like real clear where people are like, that makes a lot of sense. But then also it's like, I don't think voice interfaces are the only great place for kind of a chatbot. I think also like anywhere where I can, and this is really hard, like I don't know if we have a good way of quantifying this today, but anywhere I can like say what I want in my own words, and the system can more efficiently kind of either just take that action for me, or at the very least tell me what to do in order to take that action, without me having to figure out some like complex graphical user interface. I think in the long run, like that's where like conversational interfaces will shine. But today, it really probably depends on the context. But I think as you start to think about a project, right, I'm a big fan of like the Wizard of Oz approach of like, okay, is this a good use case? Let me just pretend like I'm the assistant and kind of play it out as a human and see like, does this seem like it's more efficient or not than the interface. So kind of a classic example that got me, this is quite rambling, but the last point is the classic example that got me into it like a long time ago is I was in like a rural area where there wasn't great internet, or I don't even know if like phones back then had, or if I had data or whatever, but it was like you could text message the weather, and I thought that was like the coolest thing ever, that you could be like, what is the weather today? And then it would return to you the weather. A very simple use case, but I think sometimes if you think about dimensions, like not having enough data for be able to stream, a complex web or mobile app or update all of that, like conversational interfaces are quite bandwidth.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up on a farm, and we had, towards the end of high school, we had like satellite internet. We got like 250 megs a month before they started charging you, and we didn't have cell phone access. But like, is it going to rain this week is a very important question when you're about to cut hay. You really do need to know. So having a very accessible way to access that information is good, right? That can definitely change people's lives. And also, I've been thinking about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to flip the question to you as well. Like, how would you answer that same question? When to use a chat?
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot as well. And also, folks in the chat, please feel free to start your questions, and we'll get to them. I just want to Yeah, I don't get to talk to Ty that much, so I like to pick his brain. Um, but I've been thinking about sort of situations where I've used a chatbot where I was like, this is fantastic. One where it's not is booking flights, because I want to see all my options at once. And like, obviously I'm not doing that right now, but for my job I used to fly a lot. And for me, like, I know what I like. I know that like I want a specific seat, I want a specific time. I don't want to go to some airports. I do want to go to other airports. But never fly into O'Hare in winter if you can avoid it. So stuff like that. And so for me, just having a bunch of options I could look at very quickly and pick the one that I wanted, rather than having to go through a conversational turn to be like, no, I don't want that seat. Like, can I get one, that gets in at 2 to, Dallas or whatever. So that, because I do want a lot of sort of like a visual interaction with a lot of information at once, the chatbot would slow me down. But something that, a place where chatbots really helped me is when I was interacting with large institutions that had like a lot of complexity. So a good example in the US would be trying to book a doctor's appointment, because if you have health insurance, not every doctor takes every health insurance. Your specific needs are gonna vary, right? So like, I think on my plan, I can't go see like a specialist. Like if I just went and talked to a physical therapist, even though if they accepted my personal insurance, they would still need to be referred by my like general doctor first in order for the insurance to cover it. I can't just be like, I have this problem, I'm gonna go see a physical therapist about it.
Yeah.
So having a chatbot to like step you through that process and like pull together these pieces of information that are in different places so that you can afford to go get the help that you need. It gives you like a very transparent way to get through the system, even if you don't know like what an in-network person is. Like, you don't necessarily have to use those words, you don't have to know all the key terms, you can sort of express what you need and the assistant meets where you are. I think that in particular is a type of application where you can really, really help people and just help people. I don't know.
Yeah,
I care about that.
And then, like, especially if they like, I mean, often are like, the extent of what they want is, I want a doctor's appointment, right? And that the problem is underlyingly more complex than that. So, like, what's the difference? Like, something I always think about, like, what's the difference between, say, Google and Raza, right? It's like, Google search is nice, but like, you have one shot at it, right? If just say doctor's appointment or whatever, like, there's no Google, assistant. I guess there is a Google assistant, but it doesn't work this way where it's like, hey, actually, I have seen it being tested, A/B tested on Google, where they then do Google Assistant to follow up. But it's really that dialogue disambiguation, right? And that dialogue of walking you through something. And so similarly, like, say, a complex organization like my bank, right, in the US, I actually use their chatbot because I don't want to have to learn their app and all of the different ways they've structured the information, how they've thought about it. It's just like, I want to update my privacy settings, and then it will just take me to that part of the app and I can easily do it. And it's much, much faster than like clicking through everything and figuring out where the designer and developer might have assumed, or in the best case scenario might have built for the vast majority of people where they would think to look for it, but doesn't necessarily match up with my understanding and vision of reality.
Yeah, it's a more, because we know how to have conversations, if the conversation works well, there's less learning about how to use the interface. If it works badly, however, because we know how to have conversations, we will judge it as a conversation. So it's sort of the double-edged sword a little bit. Nazir says, thank you for all the informative videos you published. Very educational. Oh, thank you. I'm really glad you find them helpful. Enrique says, almost in time. Almost. Yeah, you got here right near the beginning. And Amina says, how did you guys come to use Raza as a name? Does it stand for something?
Yeah. I don't think Rachel or I were here when the name was selected, but from the origin stories I've heard, the original name for Raza was based off of the Latin phrase tabula rasa, which I think is often translated into like blank slate in English, which in some ways somewhat makes sense for us. I think we could maybe debate this a little bit, but the basic premise, right, is like the chatbots or kind of the Rasa framework doesn't know anything to start, right? And then it's kind of that blank slate, and then you use Rasa to hopefully not be a blank slate. But I believe that's where the original name Raza came from. And then, I mean, have a 4-letter URL, for example, and have the .com for it. And at a company of Raza size is, I think, I mean, super helpful for search engine optimization and people being able to find it. And it's, I mean, quite catchy and easy to remember, though. I've always found that, like, when people first interacted, even me, when I was like joining the company, is it Raza or is it Rasa, or like it's hard to know how the S is actually pronounced, right? I'm sure different people pronounce it differently. I accept any way of pronouncing it.
I think it was Al that maybe mentioned to me as well that it's easy to say in all the languages they spoke at the time. So also good cross language.
Gotcha. But you can definitely hear, like, I know, like, I think I want to say Yusto, one of our developer advocates as well, like in I forget what language he was telling me, but it like means teardrop or something like that. And then I think in Polish, someone recently told me it means something else. And so, as far as I'm aware, I haven't come across anywhere it means something that we wouldn't want to be associated with. But I've heard it is, I mean, in the way in English it isn't a word. As far as I'm aware, it is actually a word in some languages.
I hope that answers your question. It's searchable. There's also like 2 other companies with the same name, but they do different things, so that's fine. Pyro Snake says, can Raza do open domain Q&A with lots of intents? Open domain, it depends, I would say. I don't know. Do you have a immediate reaction you want to give to this?
I would say I'd probably caution against it. Personally, it's not. Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about Raza, because it's open source and it does give you customizability. In theory, you could use it for any kind of natural language understanding or even any kind of conversational system you want to. But it's really focused on building more like task-oriented assistants or assistants that help you achieve and do something. So kind of Q&A, right? I imagine it would struggle to compete with the state of the art for Q&A, and especially open domain. I've heard of some people using it for that, but as far as I'm aware, no one has been super successful, especially in comparison to the other kind of approaches other people.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason, because we are so focused on task-oriented dialogue systems, so and this is like a specific type of NLP system, right, where you talk to it and you're trying to do something specific. And also that's usually what companies don't usually want to build open domain things. Because that's really our focus, in those types of systems, generally most people want to do a small number of possible tasks that the system could do. So in general, Raza isn't set up really well to handle, enormous, like, you can say anything to the assistant and it will respond appropriately, right? That's really more of a different sort of system, and one that is, I mean, honestly harder to, a lot of the current approaches for that are completely end-to-end and use sort of large neural language models and also make things up. not specifically Q&A systems, but more like just completely open domain systems. So yeah, I probably wouldn't use Raza for that. But if you have like a lot of frequently asked questions and you want to be able to answer that, yes, you can do with Raza. The big sort of bottleneck there is for each of the questions you need to provide, I would say, between 7 and 100. I know that's a wide variety. Examples of how someone might ask that question to your system, ideally ways that people have asked that question in the past, and then use that to train your intents. So yeah, I hope that helps. I think that if that like is specifically what you're building, Raza might not be the best choice for you.
But if you are going the FAQ route, a lot of people get started with that, right? I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think that's the most automating use case or whatever, but it often can be, right? Where you don't have to like look through a whole list of FAQs. You can just say in your own words what you want, right? And get a response. So oftentimes people start there, a lower risk kind of scenario, or if something goes wrong or whatever, it just isn't able to answer your FAQ, and it can send you to an FAQ page or into a person that can maybe answer your question. But like Rachel said, if it's like truly open domain and if you want it kind of grounded and connected to reality, like
that's a hard question.
Yeah.
Harrisake says thank you. Yeah, I hope that helped. I know a little bit of a frustrating answer, but I would also be a little bit leery of people who told you you could do that using their tool, and they were just like, yeah, you could ask any question to the system and it'll give you the correct answer out, because as far as I know, that is very much not a solved problem. Nazir says, Raza published a video on a prototype bulk labeling tool to reduce the annotation workload for human annotators. How does it work with Q&A annotations, e.g. reduce human effort by 1%, 10%? So the bulk labeling tool is, my understanding, so Vincent was the one who made this, is that it is intended to be more exploratory and less to replace close annotation. So it might help you sort of develop intents to begin with, but I wouldn't rely on it to create all your intents and to sort your data into those intents. And Vincent might say something slightly different here, but at least my experience is if you start with some sort of automated clustering and then you use those clusters as your input, the probability that those clusters are going to map well onto specific things that a user wants to do is pretty low. It might, in like a very specific instance where there's like 3 things that people want to do, you've seen all 3 things, and all 3 things are very distinct from each other, but that tends to be pretty rare. And I would more sort of use it for understanding your data than replacing annotation. But that's my stance on the matter. Yeah. I don't know if you have worked with the bulk labeling tool more than I have, Ty.
Probably not, but I have looked into it and had a couple conversations with Vincent about it. Yeah, I would agree. It's more for that 0 to 1, right? Like understanding if you do have some level of existing data already, if you're following CDD and you've collected a lot of data and you haven't annotated it recently, right? You might expect some level of drift, or you might expect, for some reason, the world that you're modeling has changed a lot. Like maybe it's a kind of a nice exploratory tool, but I wouldn't recommend annotating with it. To answer how well it works, I think we don't have a great sense of, even for the exploratory 0 to 1, how well it works. And so if you do try it out and do have feedback, I think sharing it with Vincent would be super helpful. We get a better sense. Did it work? How did it not work for you? How could we make it better? And I think right now it's a kind of a prototype, as you mentioned, and so maybe eventually it'll turn into a product we offer and stuff like that. So it's always super helpful to get feedback from your community about how well it works or how well it didn't, and that informs us with what we build next.
However, if your question is, I want to, maximize my annotation and my annotator's work, Tyler, where is the NLU Insights tool in the doc? I can't find it.
Not yet.
I thought it was on the CDD page, but I think it might not be.
Yeah, it should be in the Raza X docs. Is that where we are right now? I think we're in the Raza.
That's a good question. You know what? You are 100% correct. Oh. That is in fact why we're in the wrong place.
Cool. But that's in events. Sometimes this, maybe there. Sometimes the search is not the most helpful. I'm sure you know probably better than me even, but I'm like, why is the search result coming up? So maybe we could improve our Allegolia.
So we do know that this is something that people want. And actually, you the lead on this? Am I wrong about that?
On what?
On the Insights tool?
I was involved in the NLU Insights, Intent Insights.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about it and how it helps to address the problem of annotating is hard, it takes a long time.
Yeah. So I'd say like it's the Intent Insights. It's probably a little bit hard to see from this because it's focusing on the run evaluations up here, but it basically runs this evaluation of your of the training data that you currently have annotated, and it gives you a report using kind of the same Raza open source cross-validation that you could use in the command line, but it just automatically does it once per day, and it exposes precision recall, and then based on those numbers and the number of training data you have and some other aspects, kind of give you potential warnings of where your training data might be having problems or where it can be improved, and then kind of gives you an action of whether you should annotate more examples or review the examples you already have. And so generally, I think when we built it, we kind of thought through like 2 use cases, especially for it. It's like before you've decided to annotate, like be able to like have a screen where you can kind of get some level of instrumentation to understand where could things be improved. And I mean, point you in the direction of if you have an hour to annotate, like what would probably be the best use of your hour to get the most benefit from. And so, I mean, if you haven't started following CDD, if you're not annotating data, I mean, if you have some data, I'd recommend running it through that and seeing how well it performs and doesn't. If you're not following CDD, or if you are just getting started with your project, it probably won't score really well, but that's okay. It's kind of an area that you can improve on. And then if you do start following CDD and getting messages that you have received from users and start using those as examples for your intents, you'll see kind of the numbers go up. And that's kind of the other use case, the second one, which is after you have annotated, running it or having it run, say, overnight after you've annotated during the day, and come back the next morning and kind of see what was the impact of the annotation you did. Because it's also a hard problem of, okay, I did all this work for annotation, but did I actually improve anything? Did it get better? And so the idea is you can see from this intent insights that, hey, it does work better. And the nice thing is it just automatically runs. You can set like, hey, run at 12 a.m. when I'm obviously sleeping and not annotating, and come back the next morning and have it run. And I think the reason that you probably do want to run it overnight is it does take a while because you're doing cross-validation, right? Where you're basically training a model almost like 5 times and then testing it on each of those 5 different models and coming up with these F1 precision recall scores from that.
Yeah, so hopefully that helps address your question a little bit, Nazir. Yeah, I know, annotating takes forever. But it's also there's sort of a little bit of a mystique, and I'm sure y'all have done some annotating, some data science, and you're sort of familiar with this at this point, but it's helpful to reiterate, particularly for, say, your supervisor who may not be a data scientist. But the work of data science, and particularly this sort of NLP project, like, it's a little bit building models, but mostly it's data management. Mostly it's, labeling and validating and adding new data and restructuring intents and moving data around and labeling it in different ways. And I realized that it feels a lot less glamorous than just like, being in TensorFlow, changing your layer configurations. But, that's, for most people, particularly when you're getting started, that's where really you're going to see the biggest improvements is implementation. Because if you think about it, you're getting, you had your initial training data. Here's the actual population of data in the world that you want to model. The more of this you get, the better your model will reflect, understand. Yeah, natural language understanding, understand what's going on. Anyway, that's my tangent. And I, especially for people who are brand new to data science or brand new to NLP, unfortunately, that is the way that it is. Right. Enrique asks, what about a Raza voice UI? Anything official coming soon? ... Yeah. I mean, who knows what the future will hold? I definitely don't want to make any product promises at this point, but it would be hard for us to build an ASR system for all of the languages that we want to support that isn't already be doing better by somebody else who's been working on it longer and has more data. There is, if you're interested in open source ASR that you wanted to integrate with Raza, a bunch of folks who used to be at Mozilla working on Common Voice just started a new startup, and Maddie talked with Josh Mayer, who's working in it in the last podcast episode. That's what I'm pulling up in another another window right now. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to talk about voice a little bit, Ty, while I try and find the specific thing I'm looking for?
Yeah, definitely.
Take a second.
I mean, I'll be a bit more ambitious than Rachel and make promises, but with no timelines, right? I think, like, yes, eventually, like, voice is super important to us, and I think we need better answers than we have today. I think that's pretty clear. So having something, I mean, whether it's offered by us or by others, and it's actually quite exciting, the newer things that came out or are coming out. Like, I think the former Mozilla Deep Speech team, who are no longer at Mozilla, have started their own startup. And I want to say in that same week, I saw another company that came out and started their own startup around like open source kind of ASR or open source text to speech, speech to text. And so I'm pretty hopeful that, I mean, obviously Raza's open source, we can continue to use it with any of those systems. And I mean, eventually I think our research team will get into that space, right? But it's kind of adding a layer of complexity. I don't know where I was reading, but I was reading yesterday. Someone was asking, is like text to speech, speech to text, is a voice, right? Like part of NLP, and people were kind of debating it and just talking about it. Because so much research, right, doesn't include that. It's like start with the text, right? And I think part of the reason is like NLP on text is hard, and voice is almost just harder because you have this potential noise that could be introduced prior to like getting to the text. And so something like, can you just put ASR in front of your text-based NLU model? Like, I don't think that's necessarily true, right? Like ASR might not correctly parse the messages that are coming in, and then often people speak differently and they type as well, or things get interrupted if there's multiple voices. Like I think Alexa is a new feature. I'm not sure how well it works of having different people, like being able to identify different people. Kind of the list goes on and on.
Voice identification, not voice recognition, separate tasks.
Gotcha.
I got yelled at a lot about mixing them up in grad school. Just if anyone was interested in looking up more on that.
Cool. So kind of a rambling answer, but I would say, I mean, with Raza, we like to make sure that when we deliver product and when we build things, we do it well and we do it right. And in my opinion, ideally, it's the best and becomes that standard we want to be. And so I think if we take on voice, it won't be taken lightly.
And after many furious minutes of Googling, I cannot find the podcast episode for the life of me. I'm pretty sure it came out last week. Koki is the company that I was thinking about. Okay. And they have a lot of open source models if you're interested.
Nice. And is this the Mozilla Deep Speech team, or is this a separate team?
Yeah, I think this is the Mozilla folks. Pretty sure. Yeah, Josh Mayer is on it. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Who knows what the future will hold? I will say, don't hold to your breath just at the moment. But Amina says, I want to build a chatbot and I have 2 or more different fields/clients for an example, bank and insurance. Do you recommend to build 2 assistants or just 1? Does it depend on the number of intents? I personally, I'll tell you, I have a different approach here. I would probably build 2 assistants unless you have a strong reason for them to be integrated, particularly for something like banking or insurance, where privacy and data control is going to be super important.
I would agree with that. And more than likely, I think they wouldn't be the same assistant. Like I struggle, and like unless it's like maybe like an internal bot for those types of companies that's like human resources related, and that's kind of doesn't depend on the industry, then maybe something like that would work. But I would struggle to see where you'd have a lot of overlap between the 2 of them. Otherwise, it's probably much different language that your users are using. Even for like customer service bot, like they're talking about different products, they're doing different things, and they're able to do different things. And so I would probably agree with Rachel that imagine 2 assistants would make sense here, but also I think it depends on, I mean, not the number of intents, but your specific situation. It's always real hard to be like, give very broad advice about something when it's probably quite specific to the situation of whether or not it makes sense. But I think starting off with two assistants, and I mean, even just following CDD or like the Wizard of Oz approach we talked about earlier, where you pretend to be the bot, right? If you pretend to be the bot for both of those companies with some of their customers or some of their employees or whatever, and you get a sense of, are they saying the exact same things? Like that might be the best way to try it out. Is they're not saying the exact same things. If there's divergence, then it's probably to assist. And I would guess that would be the case, but it's always worth, I think, trying, experimenting.
And also, I've mentioned this before, I'm an efficient person. I'm kind of lazy. One very complex system is much more difficult to maintain than two simpler systems. Right. Question from Rashmi. How good is the support for deployment on Windows Server? We do support Windows for Rasa open source and local mode for Rasa X. I don't know about Rasa Server. Do you know off the top of your head, Ty?
I wouldn't say we support on Windows Server. I've heard some people like attempting to do it, or even in the past sometimes be successful, but I know it is a constant source of frustration for a lot of users. And it's something that we definitely need to get better about. I guess one thing you could do is we do offer the ability to run, trying to think, effectively Linux on your Windows machine and like a Linux virtual machine on your Windows machine, but specifically Windows Server, I think it would be probably pretty challenging.
I would say probably mainly for some of the dependencies, so like stuff like that. Yeah. Good luck. Feel free to ask on the forums if. Oh, there we go. Feel free to ask on the forums if you run into any questions. Someone will help you. All right. Nazir says, so if Raza doesn't use the bulk labeling tool for annotations, what tool you use to reduce human QA annotations, or are annotations 100% human driven? I mean, if you're super familiar with conversation-driven development, which is our general suggested approach to writing chatbots or conversational AIs, yes, you're gonna have to do human annotation. Yeah, but I mean, a lot of it is just once you have your assistant trained, a lot of it is more like checking the annotations, and hopefully they're right more often than they're wrong. So as your assistant gets better and better over time, it should be, you should need to change a smaller percentage of the total interactions. If the number of interactions goes up, annotation time may not go down over time. I don't know if you have additional thoughts there, Ty.
No, I think today, right, the systems are, I think Rachel taught me this term, learn by example, right? And you really, there's no substitute for people being involved in that process of ensuring those examples are good. But as Rachel mentioned, once you actually have a deployed system, it becomes easier because you can use the predicted intent, say, as making it easier, so you don't have to select through all possible ones. You can kind of confirm or deny. And then it's really that long tail of, I mean, a lot of users will say a lot of things, but that are common, but there's going to be a lot of people who say things that don't fit into, I mean, the majority of the distribution. That is really usually a long tail. And so there's no substitute for people kind of being involved in that process. But that's where I would say I'd recommend, at the very least, doing conversation-driven development as soon as possible, because otherwise you do a lot of human effort to build, I mean, say, script to generate data or to come up with data on your own or scrape data from somewhere, and it ends up with not a very good system, and then you end up having to ultimately follow conversation-driven development anyways. And so I would recommend at least starting there. And that's where I think also, like, where we're going right now is just talking to someone who's kind of an expert in like this area of software 2.0, that really, that's the machine learning is kind of person's quest should be almost to replace themselves always, right? And really put the like humans at the center, the domain experts for the conversational AI system, or even broader applications of machine learning around, say, like medical diagnosis or other things. Like you really want the people that understand the problems deeply to be the ones involved, right? And that's the nice thing about how machine learning systems work is like you can teach them to annotate, you can teach them to kind of build like a large chunk, if not most, of the system, and they don't have to learn, say, how to code. And so in some ways that's an advantage. But I know, right, if you're one developer and you're building a conversational interface, it might not be the best news to hear that you're going to actually spend most of your time not doing the fun things like coding, but annotating data. But there's real no replacement.
And just a quick resource that might be helpful if you haven't been working in CDD. Like we've spent a lot of time thinking about this and working and building tools to make it easier. And the CDD playbook, which is info.raza.com/CDD-playbook. It's totally free. It sort of walks you through the process. There's a bunch of exercises to sort of help make your experience as painless as possible. But yeah, the data is the work. All right. Enrique says Maddie's talk was about NVIDIA Jarvis integration, something you could do with Raza code directly. I don't think was that the talk she gave last week? I don't think I've seen that one yet. But yeah, possibly. I don't know, have you thought about Jarvis integration at all? Jarvis really quick. Different stuff, GPUs, no surprise, multimodal. Oh, they also often offer like a vision integration. Interesting. Oh, Enrique says for the voice question, says Raza voice UI repo is great, but not updated recently. Oh yeah. Yeah, it probably hasn't been. You might file an issue on it, especially if it's not up to 2.0. I will say that we are working on something else right now. Keep your eyes peeled. Something is happening. So I don't know that's going to happen soon, but Rashmi says, I have an on-prem application that will be on individual machines of each user. How should I make the chatbot a part of the app license machine so it can be packed as an executable? Yeah, this is an architecture question. And it sounds like they won't have network access, just based on sort of the way that the question is phrased.
This one's way over my head.
What I do in this situation? I guess it depends a little bit on the end. I don't know why my eyes are closed. I'm just thinking really hard. I think it would depend a little bit on the end user. If it's developers, I might just, create a alias command line widget so that they can launch their Raza server right from the command line and talk to it using Raza shell. Like if specifically it is for developers, and it like helps them do things they need to do during the development process. Probably not your target audience, I would just guess, based on the number of people who use computers and the number of people who are developers. I might have a local Raza X instance on each of them and then use the local version of the widget so that you can like have it pre-bookmark in whatever browser, and I don't know, just like have it the server running in the background, and then add it as a bookmark to the server so that people can talk to it that way. That seems like the least work to Yeah, it's going to be a little bit hard to do CDD though, because you're not going to have access to the data.
It might be worthwhile having like a server on your computer that you have access to, and improving the assistant quite a bit before you actually then put it onto each user.
Yep.
Worthwhile to think through.
Yeah, I'd probably give yourself like, because it sounds like this is going to be pretty important and integral to their workflows, I'd give myself like a solid quarter of UX improvements and testing and conversations and improving the assistant. If it was just me working on it. Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting application, Rashmi. I hope it goes well for you. And maybe next week I think is Aquila, so if you're free at this time next week, I might come back and ask Aquila, who would probably have a better answer for you than certainly me. All right. Amina and Rashmi say thank you. You're very welcome. Nick says, is there any process where we can fetch the information directly and develop a knowledge base from the website for training, and the response shows in the chat window? Okay, so you've got a website, you've got a bunch of stuff on it, you want to create a knowledge base from the stuff on the website, and you want people to be able to interact with that in a chat. I wonder if this is I know Nick's been working on a pretty complex FAQ assistant for a while now, so I wonder if this is more on that particular. I don't know. Do you have any suggestions there, Ty?
Yeah. Just parsing the question a little bit, like, I guess first and foremost, I think it's going to require some effort to like put together that knowledge base. I don't know if like from the website means you're like, oh, you just have a website and you want it to be able to just already have like use it effectively as a knowledge base. I think that would be kind of difficult today. We have a knowledge graph integration with we've definitely with Kraken, and I've seen some other people set it up with other kind of knowledge graphs, but you then have to like port that information over to that. So maybe something like Gina AI, or even just Elastic or Algolia or something like that, where you can take that website and then, you know what I mean, build those a knowledge search out of that, and then have a chatbot that can via API interact with those. Might be one way of going about it.
Yeah, and I don't know if we talked about this before. Knowledge base bot, which I think is on the Raza HQ GitHub. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. That might be a code example to work on. I mean, the assistant we've been working on in the live coding does kind of this, but it's structured data. Not that knowledge bases aren't structured data, but it's tabular data. Looking for underscore. There is no underscore. I don't know why I always want to add it. No, there is two A's in Raza though. I'm gonna do my awful typos in another window so you don't have to see. And then I was looking for what is it? Knowledge base bot. Want to go to examples. I want to go to there. There we go. Okay, so it is in it's in Raza. So Raza HQ, Raza tree main examples. So the main repository. And then knowledge base bot is a little mini example that might be helpful. And then the specific things that might work, particularly if you have the knowledge bot already, is the actions for the query, which is, again, sort of what we've been doing in the live coding, but that's more of a SQL tabular data. Yeah, and I think that this will specifically get, it requires specific fields. So it requires, you know, the name of the hotel and the city and that it is a hotel. So this is a pretty limited query, and if you wanted to have more complex queries, you'd need to spend more time working on it. But yeah, no, this might be helpful. Next says, you do not want to create two different knowledge bases, one for the website and one for the chatbot. Oh, so the knowledge base is the back end of the website. Gotcha. Yeah, in that case, I would write a custom action to query that knowledge base. And I guess the challenge there is helping users who don't know what's in the knowledge base and what different things are called get the information out. And if it's, I don't know if you want to jump in here or not, Ty, but my general approach there would be probably to write sort of like a general class and method for creating a query, and then for the different specific types of things that people will want to ask. Like in this example, like one for booking a hotel, one for like getting information about a specific hotel. I'd probably write a different class for each of those that inherits from my main class that is triggered by a different action. I don't know. That's probably what I'd do.
That's a tough one. Kind of
Yeah.
what I was saying earlier. It really depends on like what does that knowledge base look like, right? And I mean, if it's 10 things, then maybe you can expose to the user, hey, here's a list of things you can have, and that might make your problem a bit easier, right? But if it's hundreds or thousands and very specific jargon that maybe a user wouldn't know or whatever, I think that would affect the approach that I would recommend.
It says, I've implemented this already. I want to fetch the data directly from the website. Oh, in that case, instead of pointing it towards, I'm assuming you have like those endpoints exposed. Instead of like pointing at, creating connection to a specific database or opening a specific file, I would use your action to create the URL to the specific resource and then dynamically generate it, and then, either create the link or get the information from the relevant link and then parse it. It might even... No, I don't think I'd do a connector for that, because the connector is really for passing the conversational information back and forth. You could do a connector if you really wanted to. It seems a little bit hacky, but it might be easier. But yeah. Or if you have access to the underlying knowledge base, I would be very cautious about letting people interact with the knowledge base directly. I would make sure that they only have read access and that it is restricted, just for security reasons. It seems like a potential way to cause problems for yourself. But yeah, I mean, if the endpoints of the knowledge base are exposed on your website to begin with anyway, then you can use them here. Yeah. I don't know. I hope that helps. Is there an API to help fetch the data from the website? I mean, did you build an API? I guess. This is a little bit more web devy than my specific thing. But I mean, like, Python fetch from URL. URL lib, that's what I was looking for, is the Python library that I would use. Yeah, so you can get information from URLs using various things. You can request the information from the URL because it's already out there and you've made it. That's what I do. Amina says, can you please update the knowledge base example? I thought it was updated. Oh, it's not too late ago. It should be 2.0, I believe. Yeah, if there's something in particular that's out of date, Yeah, I might file an issue on it if it's causing you issues. It's all right. Got 10 minutes. A little bit more coffee. I don't know if you have anything else to.
I don't think so.
Pretty in the weeds.
Yeah.
Cigar says, I'm new to Raza. Welcome to the Raza community. And I want to expose extra layers of the API endpoints, like a speech recognition API. How can I integrate it with a Raza server without using? I would use a connector. Would use a custom connector. Step 1, find the thing in the docs. There we go. Yeah, so we have a bunch of pre-built connectors, right? And these are sort of ways to pass. So you've got your browser server, it takes in some sort of text, it passes out some sort of text or executes some code, depending on, what you've set your assistant to do. And we've got a bunch of pre-built connectors for specific platforms, but if you want to use your own, the custom mesh method lets you integrate with whatever you have access to. Yeah, so I would. Yeah. Nick says, I'll check it out and update you. Yeah, good luck. It sounds like I know you've been working on this project for a while. Sounds like you've been making good progress. So, yeah, let me know how it turns out. But I don't believe you need a separate connector, a separate server for your connectors. Trying to think of an instance when you would need a separate connector for a separate server for your connector. There probably is one. I don't know it off the top of my head. But if back here, this endpoints here, and I don't does this. But you would just the connector would let you integrate with your current Raza server and pass information back and forth. Hopefully that helps answer your question, Cigar. Cigar, I'm sorry I'm saying that wrong. Is this a good approach to fetch the data from a website or to create an individual knowledge base for the chatbot? I mean, the problem with fetching it from a website is that you might run into a little bit of extra latency. There are probably other problems that I just don't know about because I'm not really a web developer. I mean, if it's your knowledge base and it's already hosted somewhere, and you can like integrate with it directly, I might do that instead. You'd still need an endpoint for it. Yeah, I would go through like, yeah, I think that's how you should do it. I feel like that's what Greg. I might be wrong about what Greg would say. I don't know.
What would Greg say?
What would Greg say? Wouldn't we all like to know? Yeah, that's what I'd do. I hope it works for you. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, got just a couple minutes, and I think we've actually answered all the questions. So I'm gonna wrap up with a question for you. Oh, wait, no, I was wrong. Fagal says, is there an option to integrate Raza X with version control other than Git-based ones? Non-Git based version control for Raza X.
Today, no. Just kind of short answer. Raza X is built with the premise that you are using Git to version your training data. I'd be very curious what other version control system you're using. I imagine maybe it's probably DVC or something like that. If you are doing that, I'd be very curious to hear what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and kind of the advantages over, say, using Git, especially because it does have that @RazaX connection. So, I mean, my email is t.dunn@raza.com. If you're willing to share or willing to chat, I'd love to find out and hear what you're using, and maybe I mean, if it's compelling enough and we have enough users that are also using the other version control system that you're using, it might be a possibility. But today we think Git, just the ecosystem that's built around it and the success we've seen other users with it, that's what we're focusing on at the moment.
I know this is slightly tangential to the question, but if you were looking for GitLab rather than GitHub, this came out yesterday, very recently, a blog post on GitLab about doing custom actions on and Rasa X on GitLab as opposed to GitHub. So if, again, slightly tangential to your question, but I know folks have been asking about GitLab, and this just came out. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. I know it's a little bit of a disappointing answer, but do please reach out to Ty if you have more thoughts. Sure. All right, so with the last couple minutes, if somebody else pops in with a question, we will answer that, of course. But I know, Ty, your job is a lot more future focused than mine, I guess. So just to give you a very dreaming question, what bot would you love to see being built with Raza? What is like your dream Raza project?
Good question. The one I would like, but I think it'd be really tough, right, for anyone that don't, I say, work at Raza or whatever company or organization I might be a part of next. But I always think it, and I mean, maybe it's not one that I actually use, but just seeing the community built would be one where it's always hard, especially when you're new at a company, to find out like who's responsible for what, right? And I would love like a conversational interface where you could be like, I'm new, I need help with X, Y, or Z thing, and it can like predict, you know what I mean, like based on the data it's had before or whatever, like who the likely person is that would know about that. And then I think it has a cool like potential feedback system with it, where then that person could be like, good try, bot, but like actually the best person for this is Rachel, right? And then like everybody at the company could all contribute to basically kind of mapping out who knows the most about each individual thing. One of my friends works at one of those, I mean, hotshot car companies. I won't name which one it is, but from what I understand, like they have like a Bolt guy, and it's just like, or Bolt gal, right? And it's like that girl is just responsible, and she like knows all of the knowledge. It shouldn't probably be that way. It should probably be more dispersed, but oftentimes as organizations grow, that doesn't happen to be the case, that information is well dispersed. And so like to find that person who's in charge of like one very specific thing in an organization would be super helpful, and it would make everyone's interaction so much more efficient. I mean, at Raza, it's pretty easy because I can just message Rachel and she can, I mean, quickly respond on Slack and find the person or knows the person, whatever. But I remember being at some larger companies and it would be like, send an email, wait a week to get a response, find out that they're not the right person, like forward them to this other person that might be, they're not right, they forward, and then it takes 3 weeks to find a person just to get your question answered. Like, seems rather ridiculous.
I've also struggled with this.
I would love to see a conversational interface for something like that.
Oh. And like the only way to find that information before you like physically contact a bunch of people is like, do you know the specific acronym of the particular project that's very relevant to the thing that you're working on right now? And if you don't, oh well. Or like, there is information, but it's 2 years out of date and that person has left the company, and like you don't know like who took their job and who to talk to about it. Yeah, that would be, man, that would make a lot of people's lives much easier.
Definitely. But it kind of has a cool property for CDD, right? Because the company's always changing, right? You said like people are leaving and going, and new people are coming, and new projects are being started, and products are being put to the grave, and all these things, right? So it would be definitely a really good use case for conversation-driven development. It would have to be kind of always updating and live and not going stale, which in some ways it might be better as a conversational interface than, say, a web app or a mobile app that require someone to go update, and nobody wants to update documentation.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the spreadsheet of who does what that is so out of date it's no longer useful. Oh, wow. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining today, Ty. Content for the rest of the week, we're going to keep working on that review of intent classification and slot filling neural techniques. The paper, we're going to be reading that tomorrow, and we are sort of going to be moving forward in time to things that are more current. So come join for that. You do not need to have joined for the first part. And then on Friday, we're going to be setting up a Raza X server, maybe on DigitalOcean, maybe on Heroku. I haven't decided yet. I'm going to pick a provider, and we'll set up our Raza X server for our deployment for the chatbot that we've been working on that queries a very small database. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Thank you for joining, Ty, and we will see you all tomorrow. And if you have questions, as always, please the forum answer them.
Cheers. Night.